and his focus is on the intersection of constitutional law and technology. An expert who argues in front of the Supreme Court.
I never argue for the Supreme Court.
No. Writes briefs. My bad. Writes briefs.
Not yet, at least.
Often. Right? I'm projecting future truths now. And then also you appear in Wall Street Journal and on publications. And we are very happy to hear him talk about 3D printed guns and First Amendment, Second Amendment implications for that today. So we'll turn the time over to him, and then we can just wrap up around the quarter.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is my favorite school to speak at because it's the closest. My law school is like 5 minutes that way. So this is very, very easy for me to get here. So this question, who here has ever used 3D printing? Cool. What have you made?
I made the Millennium Falcon.
The what?
The Millennium Falcon.
Oh, that's kind of, how big was it?
Like, big.
Was it like the scale and everything? You ever go to Disney World with like the scale Millennium Falcon? Ever see that before? It's pretty cool. All right, what'd you make? Some over here, yeah.
Oh, in high school, for an engineering class, I made a scope for a Nerf gun.
A Nerf gun. Oh, it's actually relative. So 3D printing is not a new technology, one that's been very popular in recent years. It allows you to design an object on a screen and create it in reality. You can create things like cars and even design houses. But at the most basic level, the way 3D printing works is with code. And maybe you've used code before, maybe you haven't. I'll give you a very quick, brief tutorial. Let's say I want to make a cylinder, right? And I want to say a cylinder with a height of 20 inches and a radius of 5. If I give those instructions to a computer, it will know what to generate. If I want a sphere with a radius of 10, it will know what to generate. And 3D printing lets you make all sorts of different shapes and size objects. This is what a 3D printer looks like, and building actually a cool little race car thing. You're also able to make parts of the human anatomy. This is actually a model of a human brain. So how does a 3D printer work? It kind of works like making a candle. Has anyone ever made a candle before? No one? Okay, 2 people, right. Right, so how do you make a candle? Yeah, exactly. So you take a wick, a string, right? You dip in wax, you pull it out. You dip in wax, you pull it out. You keep dipping it, right? And each time that you dip it, the base gets a little bit thicker and thicker and thicker. You use different colors, different types of wax, make different designs. 3D printing works in much the same fashion, but rather than dipping, you are spraying. So take a look at this diagram over here. 3D printer works by having this kind of platform. It can move up and down, back and forth, left and right. And over here is a little nozzle, and it sprays a very fine layer of liquid plastic. And it sprays one layer on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. And if you spray enough of these small layers, eventually you get a ball or something else, right? But the key point is it moves very deliberately, very precise layers one on top of the other. Everyone, yep, okay, good. Here's the same idea from another angle, and you can see the computer is connected to the printer, and it sprays it. It kind of heats it up, so it keeps it nice and hot, so it doesn't, solidify right away. All right. So I want to show you now an experiment of how 3D printing actually works. This is designing an object, and I want you to try and guess what is being printed. All right. When you see what's being printed, just shout it out. Okay. All right. So here's number one. Kind of looks like a pile of goo. Here's number two. Start seeing this kind of a hexagonal honeycomb shaped lattice coming in. Here's number three. Number four. Anyone see anything yet? All right. Number 5. 6. You are very close. You're close. No, but you're close. This guy's Star Wars on his brain, right? How about now? 7, 8, 9. Ah, there it is. What was it right there? Okay, good. Yoda, right? Okay, a little bit more. Sprays a little bit more. A little bit more air. Okay, now everyone sees it, this picture, right? There it is. Okay, now everyone sees it, right? You see it? Good. Boom, 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 boom. And then the top's clean, right? So this is a very cool technology, and it lets you design things on a screen and then create them in reality. And it doesn't require much sort of know-how about how to sculpt or how to cut or how to even make things with your hand. This can be done almost entirely with a 3D printer. The art involved, though, comes from designing the item on the screen. Okay? But you didn't come here today to talk about, 3D printing Yoda or the Millennium Falcon or even a scope for a Nerf gun. No, you want to talk about 3D printing of guns. So let's take a little stroll down memory lane and talk about the Liberator. Okay. About, 12 years ago, there's a law student named Cody Wilson who went to the University of Texas at Austin, not too far from here. And he made international headlines by being the first person to print a functional gun with a 3D printer. It was called the Liberator, to liberate people from gun control laws. Now, what's this? This is the design for the barrel. The barrel is one of the most important parts of a gun. Why? I mean, obviously what the bullet flies out of, but it must withstand a lot of heat and pressure. And one of the reasons why 3D printed guns have been so difficult over the years is because plastic is not a very good fit for making a gun. Why? What happens when plastic gets really hot? It melts. And when plastic cools down, it cracks. How does a gun work? You pull the trigger, it gets really hot, and then really cold very quickly. So it's not a very good thing to make a gun out of, but Cody figured out how to do it. He designed the barrel of a gun. Who knows what this is? No one? Texas, hello? Yeah, a receiver, yes, exactly. This is the receiver in AR-15. This is the part of the gun that's actually regulated by the feds. He figured a way to 3D print receivers. He also made magazines for other types of weapons. But this is what really put Cody on the map. These are the parts for the Liberator. Josh, what am I looking at? Well, I'll help you. The blue thing over here is the handle, what you hold, right? This sort of round thing over here, that is the barrel. This is where the bullet flies out of. This white triangle thingy here, that is the receiver. That's actually what basically holds all the innards of the gun. These little squiggly thingies, these are the springs. When you pull back the hammer, when you pull the trigger, the spring snaps forward. The only piece of metal in the actual gun is this nail. Common household nail. Go to any hardware store and buy it. The purpose of the nail serves as the firing pin. What's a firing pin? So in the back of every bullet, there's a little bit of a charge. If you strike the bullet with something very sharp, it pierces the back of the bullet, and it, boom, sends a projectile forward. The bullet, of course, is made of metal, but in theory, you don't need a metal bullet, but that's usually what they work. So when you put all this up together, when you assemble everything, it looks like this. Okay? This is what the Liberator looks like fully assembled. There's the handle, there's the barrel, there's the receiver. This is the hammer. You pull it back, and you kind of see over here a little white thing, and that's the trigger. You also notice in this picture this yellow rope. Anyone want to guess why there's a rope of sufficient length on the floor near this weapon? I think I guess. Yeah.
Pull the trigger?
Yeah. Why might you not want to put your finger on this thing when you're testing it out? Just guess here.
It is an explosive charge, so.
It might blow up in your hand, right? Again, plastic is a terrible way of making a gun, right? It's not safe. It melts, it cracks, it you lose a finger or two, right? So when they first built this thing, they would take this rope and they would tie it to the trigger and send very far away and go right and pull it, and they see if they get a charge out of it. Many models of this malfunction before they get a functional unit. You actually have to treat the barrel in this chemical bath of acetone, so it won't explode. It helps withstand the heat and the pressure, which is again very hard to do because if you don't do it right, you're going to hurt yourself. But for better or worse, the Liberator made international headlines. Cody Wilson became a celebrity, or perhaps infamy, perhaps you might say. And people around the world had this collective freak out, like, oh my God, how are we going to have guns made of plastic that anyone can make? So let's talk about this from a legal perspective. So what exactly is the legal problem? And usually when I say 3D printed guns, this is what people think like, that you have a gun that just pops out of a printer. And it doesn't work like this, right? This is not reality here. This is not how things work. There's a long tradition in this country, a history and tradition, right? A long tradition in this country of zip guns. Who knows what a zip gun is? No? Texas? A zip gun is a homemade gun that anyone can make at home. Let me tell you something. It is very, very, very easy to make a gun at home. It's not hard. Google it. Ask ChatGPT. It'll tell you in 5 seconds, right? Maybe it won't. So I found this set of instructions online. This is a gun made out of a garden hose and a soldering iron. And if you combine the nozzle from a garden hose with a soldering iron, and see little springers right there, you have a very functional gun. In fact, this is probably much more effective than the plastic. This won't break in your hand and blow up. I found this one online also. This is a keychain flashlight that was hollowed out. They took out the innards of the flashlight. So it looks like, on your keychain, everyone has those flashlights, right? And they basically made a single shotgun. Don't believe me? How easy it is? We'll show you now a demonstration. Do not try this at home, please. These guys are going to make a shotgun out of a rubber tube and a metal pipe. That's all you need. And they're recording on a flip phone. It's a little bit dated, but they're serious, right? This is a serious matter. So I won't play the video. The audio is not very intelligible, but I'll show you the stills. They take a metal pipe, and you see at the end of the pipe, this little dimple, this little piece sticking out. That'll be the firing pin, okay? So they load the shotgun shell into this rubber tube, buy in the hardware store for $1. And look what they're going to do. They're going to jam this metal pipe into the back of the shotgun shell. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Just take a good look at this picture for a minute. What's wrong with this picture? I want to just shout it out. Well, they shot before. That's right. What else is wrong with this picture? Oh, they could blow up the barrel. What else is a problem? Where are they firing? Indoors, into a cardboard box. And what's behind the cardboard box? An electrical outlet. That's right. You can see a little bit more clearly in the next picture. Yeah. And the fan's running. Yeah, that's for fresh air, I guess. So these guys, again, are not the brightest. I don't mean to disparage them, but this was not the best idea. But they're going to do it. They're going to go for it. Ready? 3, 2, 1, boom. Made a gun. Made a fully functional weapon with hardware parts they can buy for a few bucks. You don't need a 3D printer, a $50,000 3D printer to make one of these things, right? You can do this much cheaper. In fact, this is probably a far more lethal weapon than something you make with a 3D printer. Now look, they're taking it out. They're smoking. They're so proud of themselves. He still has all his fingers I can see. Good for him. So was this legal, right? The short answer, and I'm going to compress a lot of case law, that if you make your own weapon under federal rules, you've not broken the law. Now, I will caveat that this actually changed in the last 2 years or so. The Biden administration put forward a rule whereby if you use a gun kit, you buy a kit, that itself might itself be a firearm. But what these guys did is not. Making a gun at home entirely with your own parts and your own designs is not a problem with the federal government. Some states have banned homemade guns, California, New Jersey, and otherwise, but in most states, what you're doing here is completely lawful. So then why are we here, right? What are we talking about? Curiously, the efforts to stop homemade weapons and 3D printed guns has not been about banning the gun themselves. No. What governments have tried to do is ban the files used to make these guns. The federal government, under the Obama administration, California, New Jersey, and other states, have made it a crime to share files on the internet that could be used to make a firearm. So here's the legal issue. Is there a First Amendment violation by restricting the sharing of files? He's nodding. Yeah, we'll talk about it, right? So the First Amendment, if you've taken First Amendment or common law, you know, bans what's called the prior restraint of speech. You can't stop people from speaking. You might be able to punish them after the fact, especially if they use their speech for harm, but you can't stop them from speaking in the first place. You might say, wait a minute, Josh, wait a minute. I get that, but you're sharing online files that can be used to make a gun. That's dangerous. We can't share information to help people do dangerous stuff, and that's just not true. Anyone hear of the Anarchist Cookbook? This guy, yeah. This is basically a book of how to be a terrorist. Not exaggerating very much, right? It also different recipes for bombs, for poisons, for different things that are quite dangerous. This is a book that's been on the shelves forever. There were many efforts to ban the Anarchist Cookbook back in the day, but those efforts were not successful, right? Dangerous speech is still protected. Unless it incites imminent violence, it's protected. I'll make another point that I don't think is too controversial, but I want to make it. Information and speech. The way we convey information today is electronically. And mere fact that you use zeros and ones rather than A's and B's does not deprive it of constitutional value. I showed you earlier the blueprints, how to design a 3D gun. These are artwork. In fact, the 3D printed gun, the Liberator, was actually put on display in an art museum. The Supreme Court has said that the creation and dissemination of information are speech. We live in a world of zeros and ones. Information is protected. Okay, The Matrix, one of the best movies. Oh, you guys are so young. This came out when I was in high school, but you weren't even born yet. It's okay. And it's all right. Fun part of this job, I get older, you see the same age, but don't worry, you two will age. It will happen, I promise. It happens to all of us. The opposite of aging is not very good. We also talked about the Second Amendment, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In 2008, the court decided D.C. v. Heller, which recognized that the right to bear arms protects an individual right. And in 2010, McDonald v. Chicago said this right applies to the states. We have some other, I love this cartoon. This is actually Dick Heller and Otis McDonald shaking hands. Great picture. The courts decided other cases. They've decided Bruin, which was the right to carry. They also decided Rahimi, which is about the rights of dangerous people to have guns. But they haven't decided, I think, what's a pretty important issue, which is the right to acquire arms. And I think this is part of the issue. The Second Amendment isn't just about keeping and bearing arms. That's actually some way of actually getting the gun in the first place. Imagine a world where the government says you can have a gun, but you can't buy one. That doesn't work. You have to be able to acquire one. In addition to acquiring arms, there's also a more fundamentally rooted right, the right to make arms. And this right goes back to the founding era. 250 years ago, when we declared independence, there was no Dick's Sporting Goods, right? There's no Walmart. If you wanted a gun, you made it yourself. There's a very deeply rooted right of manufacturing your own firearms. And until modern times, there was almost no federal regulations at all about making your own weapon. All right. So I think you have a right to acquire arms, you have a right to make arms. And then this is an interesting hybrid, what's called a hybrid right, where two rights sort of intersect. And what we have here is a right to share information about making guns and actually to make those arms. I think the First Amendment and the Second Amendment sort of work together in important ways. I think this makes the right even stronger. Now, what federal laws actually exist concerning 3D printed guns? We have what's called the Undetectable Firearms Act, passed in 1988, before most of you were even born. This law, probably not all of you were even born, sorry. It's okay. This law makes it a crime to have a gun that lacks any metal. And actually, the motivation for this gun was to make sure that any gun would trigger a magnetometer, a metal detector, like you find at any sporting event or an airport. This was inspired by the Glock, this handgun that became very popular in the 80s and 90s. Now, the Glock, to be sure, has a lot of plastic polymers on it, but still a metal gun. You can't have a plastic Glock. The real motivation was actually Bruce Willis. If you remember the Die Hard movie, a classic Christmas film. True. His great lines, his luggage. That punk pulled a Glock 7 on me. You know what that is? It's a porcelain gun made in Germany. It doesn't show up in your airport X-ray machines and costs more than what you make in a month. Now, every part of that statement was false. There is no Glock 7. It's not made of porcelain, it's metal. It's Austrian, not German. Everything there is false. But people watch movies and they pass statutes. That's how Congress works. Now, there have been attempts to ban 3D printed guns. Senator Schumer tried to ban them some years ago. Ooh, he might lose. Oh, boy. Not a good day for him. Senator Schumer tried to ban them. That statute went nowhere. There have been attempts to ban materials. There's actually a proposed bill that went nowhere to ban the plastics used to manufacture guns, which is kind of just lunacy. But the truth is, you can actually 3D print metal, like Terminator, right? So even if you ban the plastic, it doesn't go anywhere. So these guns are more or less not going to be banned. So instead, what governments have tried was to limit the speech. And this is where I have some experience. Since 2014, I've been involved in litigation involving 3D printed guns. Litigation, as you'll find out, drags on forever. We've had no clear resolution to the issue, but we keep plugging away. So something called the ITAR. Anyone hear of ITAR? Export control laws, right? It stands for the International Traffic in Arms Regulation. ITAR is a series of rules passed in the 20th century that restrict exporting arms to foreign countries. And I think this makes sense, right? Do we want to start sending nuclear secrets to China? Probably not. Do you want to start sending missiles to Syria? Probably not. So this law makes a lot of sense, and it bans shipping weapons to foreign countries. But starting in the 1980s, 90s, and more recently, the government said that software can be an arm. For example, a cryptographic algorithm, right, cryptography, might itself be considered an arm, even though it's just code. The government has said at one point that the files used to make 3D printed guns are arms. The problem is this runs headlong into the First Amendment. All right. So this brings us to the litigation. I mentioned Cody Wilson earlier. I'll come back to him. In 2013, the State Department, the Obama State Department, sent a letter to Cody Wilson saying that you are in violation of export control laws. Now, Cody has not sent a single object overseas. His sin was he put files on the internet for the Liberator and various muzzles and silencers and different items. And the government sent him a letter that the data should be removed from public access immediately. Immediately, that means right away. And this triggered a very unusual series of litigation, which I had a front row seat to. In fact, I was part of it. So initially, we sued the Obama administration in federal court in Austin in 2014. And we argued this violated the First Amendment and also due process. All right, so the trial court judge ruled against us, denied our preliminary injunction. We go to the Fifth Circuit. Fifth Circuit issues a very unusual ruling, and they say, well, we're not going to consider the merits, but we find that due to the likelihood of harm, we won't grant a preliminary injunction. All right. We then petition for certiorari. We do our best at the Supreme Court. The court denies certiorari. Right. We go back down to the trial court. The trial court then asks the parties, can you engage in mediation? This is kind of like a routine order. All right. By that point, President Trump was in office. And much to our pleasant surprise, the Trump administration worked out a settlement with us. And they basically agreed to give us a license that we're looking for that would allow us to export these files. So I'll just compress this timeline a little bit to make things a little bit easier. We were supposed to get the license on a Friday around 5 p.m. at the end of the week. We announced publicly that we reached a settlement with the government, and this settlement will be concluded on the upcoming Friday. Other groups were not content to let this happen. This began an onslaught. We were sued everywhere. So the first shoe to drop was the Brady campaign and the Giffords Law Group, all these various gun control groups. And they tried to intervene in the litigation in Austin to block our settlement. So at that point, I was basically the last man standing. All the other lawyers basically stopped working on the case, and I had to step up. So I go down to Austin, and I had to file a brief and argue a case in court and make objections. I was able to get the judge to say, okay, these gun control groups have no standing to block the settlement. It goes into effect. Okay. That was only the start of the madness. At that point, I realized, okay, all these other people are grumbling, right? People came to the hearing. We're going to get sued again. So I was like, okay, let's go ahead and let's sue these states preemptively in federal court in Austin. So we're on offense rather than defense. So we were planning to file a lawsuit on a Sunday. Okay. By this point, we already had the license, and we put the files online. So the files were being downloaded millions of times, but we didn't really announce that. We didn't tell anyone. Maybe that was a mistake. We didn't tell anyone. So on Sunday afternoon, we were planning to file this complaint against these various other entities. What we didn't know is we're about to get hit hard. So first, the Pennsylvania Attorney General files a lawsuit against us on Sunday afternoon, seeking an emergency TRO to block us from posting these files. Mind you, we'd already posted the files online. So on a Sunday afternoon, I get this frantic phone call from the lawyer saying, we want you to take these files down. I'm like, we already put them up. The judge in Philadelphia orders an emergency hearing on a Sunday afternoon. I was in New York. I did it by phone. I did it by phone from the lounge at LaGuardia Airport. I had nowhere to go. I was like, all right, I'm going to do it right here. Let's go. And I told the judge this. I said, look, judge, what if we use IP filtering to limit the files that can't be downloaded in Pennsylvania? I just made this up. I had no idea if we could even do it. Like, I had no clue. I was like, crap, this judge is going to rule against us. What can I do? So the judge says, on their representation, I will deny the TRO. So I called my client, like, Cody, we need to block Pennsylvania IP addresses. Like, can we do this? Like, I think we can do it. I'm like, okay, good, go do this. And I got on a plane. I went back home to Houston. We figured it out. We found out later this is the first time ever there was state-level IP filtering in the United States. It's never been done before. You never had to. Why would you? We blocked it. We started calling it our blue wall. We put a wall around Pennsylvania. All right. I got back to Houston, and the litigation continued. The next day, we were sued by the New Jersey Attorney General. And he sued us in the Essex County Chancery Court, which is basically a court of equity in Newark, New Jersey. And I swear to you, he sought a nationwide injunction against a Texas company in Chancery Court. You can't do that. That's not a thing. So I started to stay up all night writing a brief for this New Jersey Chancery Court. No electronic filing. I think I had to fax the papers out. I didn't know how to even. I was by myself. No one else was helping. I was just figuring this crap out. And I was able to get it filed somehow. I had a friend in New Jersey help me file it. And we had oral argument over the phone. And I told the judge, like, Judge, with respect, I don't think a Chancery Court has the power to issue a nationwide injunction as a Texas corporation. He's like, I think you're right, Mr. Blackman. So I told him the same. They said, look, same deal. We will block New Jersey IP addresses if you deny the TRO. And the judge thought about it and deliberated. Like, okay, fine, I'll deny the TRO. And so I called Cody. It's like, all right, block New Jersey, expand the wall. And Jersey said, yeah, but what if we go across the Hudson to New York and download the files there? I'm like, I don't care. Just block New Jersey. We'll figure it out later. This is called staying alive, right? We're being sued across the country. I'm like, just get through today to tomorrow. Right then, we were sued by the Washington Attorney General on behalf of like 20 other blue states, including New Jersey. New Jersey sued us twice in two different courts. You can't do that, but whatever, right? So the judge in Washington sets a hearing, and I did it by phone. There was no Zoom back then. And this was seeking, again, a nationwide injunction to block these files. And I was listening to the arguments, presenting my argument, like, free speech, First Amendment, constitutional law. And the judge from Washington, Judge Lasnik, asked me one question. What his question was, do you represent all the parties? You want to make sure the injunction would stick. I was like, oh, I'm going to lose. So in fairness, I think I did. I didn't have enough time to talk to all of them. There were a lot of different parties. I didn't have time to talk. This was moving so fast. I had no time to talk to all of them. So I said, Judge, yes. And that might have been mostly true, but I didn't want to drag this on. And so on the phone, the judge announces that he was going to be issuing an order. And I asked a question. I said, Judge, may I ask a question? Are you issuing an order against my client or just the federal government? He's like, there's no order against your client. Then he made a comment that, I hope your client obeys this order. I'm like, whoa. I said, my client always obeys court orders. And he's like, well, he's an anarchist. I was like, Judge, my client will obey the order. I take umbrage at that. And so actually I pushed back on the judge and I just lost the case. Like, oh, screw it, whatever. So I had to call Cody after this wild week. And I said, look, Cody, we just lost. I'm really sorry. You need to take down the site. And that was kind of emotional, right? Telling a client you lost a big case like this. And it wasn't like you could just flip a switch and turn the site off. It took them, I think, about an hour because they built all these firewalls, redundancies, so it could be hacked. And eventually took down the site and I got confirmation, okay, we're in compliance with the court's order. So this was a crazy week. I had to argue basically 4 TROs in 5 days. You know what the craziest part is? For this, I had never argued in any court before ever. 0. I went straight from clerking to teaching. I'm a lawyer, but barely. I basically had to do all the stuff on the fly. So it was an insane experience. Then the craziest part of that all was after I lost all these cases, my phone rings. Who is it? Governor Andrew Cuomo of blessed memory. He calls me. This last time I can tell this joke. No one will be as after this one. So Governor Cuomo calls me. I'm like, hi, Governor Cuomo. He's like, are you the 3D gun guy? I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, you tell your client to take down those files. I'm like, your attorney general just sued me and got a nationwide injunction. So yeah, they're down. He's like, well, you take them down. See what happened? He wanted credit, not as AG. And I said, your AG just won a victory. What do you want me to do? He's like, she doesn't work for me. In other words, he wanted the credit. And I told him, you know what, Governor, have your lawyer send me a letter. I'm telling the governor of New York, have your lawyer send me a letter. I'm not doing this over the phone. It's like mafioso thing. Send me a threat, take it down. And then he said, fine. I said, look, I'm from New York. I know how this works. He's like, oh, you're from New York? I was like, yeah. And he's like, where are you from? Like, from Staten Island. He's like, oh, really? Why are you in Texas? Like, I love it here. That's where I belong. He's like, oh, no, come back to New York. Like, no, never coming back. And then by chance, I forget, it was my parents' anniversary day. It was July 31st. Crazy day. And I said, you know what? Today's my parents' anniversary. I have to go call them. Trying to get up the phone, right? And it's like, you know what? You tell your parents Governor Cuomo wishes them a happy anniversary. True story. And then he asked me, who are they going to vote for? Because the election was coming up that November. And I'm like, probably you. They're Democrats. Like, okay, that's good. And then we hung up the phone. So that was my Andrew Cuomo story. Yeah, Mamdani has not called me. He's not tried to put me in a gulag yet, but that'll happen probably next year. Never going back to New York, not allowed. That's a travel ban. Do not admit black men to the boroughs. But anyway, so this litigation actually isn't even over. That was from 2018. We're 2025. Believe it or not, this litigation is still going on. And I think judges have just this fear, this hesitance about doing anything with 3D printed guns. There's just this concern, even though these guns are not very practical, they're very expensive to make. If you want to buy a gun, it's much cheaper just to buy one on the street than to have to make one yourself. It's reliable, it's effective. So I think there's a lot of fear about 3D printed guns, but frankly, I've been doing this talk now for almost 15 years. And I think it's not, the concern is far greater than the actual threat. All right, I will stop here. I welcome your questions. Thank you so much. Questions? Yes. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, do you think the actual act of making a 3D gun can be counted as speech?
It's actually a good question. I think that making the object itself is probably not speech unless you have a broad view of expressive conduct. There are cases you might study. Burning an American flag, for example. You're not uttering any words, but that's sending a pretty clear message that you're trying to oppose some regime. Burning a draft card, for example, right? Again, you're not uttering any words, but you are trying to send a message about the war. Burning a cross, right? That's another example. You're not uttering any words, but you're saying a very clear message about race, right, and intimidation. So I suppose you could argue that the act of making a gun could be seen as a mode of defiance, or defying some sort of gun control regime. But I think the more useful mechanism is whether making the guns protected by the Second Amendment, the act of actually making it, is protected. The courts have not latched onto that yet. In fact, most courts have actually held that there's no right to actually print guns at all. So, but I do think that you definitely have a Second Amendment right to make, maybe not First Amendment right to make.
I want to attach to that question, like, do you think it's not content neutral because there's laws against 3D printed guns that only apply to 3D printed guns, they don't apply to the analog, which is the zip guns?
Right. I mean, if you want to get into the weeds, there is a viewpoint discrimination perspective, or it's a content discrimination perspective. I could share the blueprints online for a toy gun, but not a real gun. So there's content discrimination there. In fact, one of the examples I used was for LARPers. You know what this is? People live action role play. There are very sophisticated designs to 3D print different weapons from movies, and it would only take a few slight modifications to turn that into an actual weapon. Right? They look realistic and they have very similar profiles. If you take seriously the argument from the other side, you could ban posting blueprints of like screws and nuts and bolts because they could be used for a gun. Okay, question over here. Yes, sir.
So I've been kind of recently thinking about 6 Hours mess with their pistols and their discharges.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of like a two-part question.
Sure.
But they're very related. One is kind of what are the limits of gun regulations in kind of through that lens, and second is that with these 3D printed guns, if they were legalized, and if you were to put out a blueprint saying this is how you 3D print a gun and it's defective,
Mm-hmm.
like it blows up in your hand or whatever, like kind of what's the liability, I guess, that you could be facing for that?
Yeah, I mean, the tort issue is non-trivial. In fact, the gun manufacturers don't like 3D printed guns because it can be dangerous. They can blow up in your hands. I tend to think that just putting a file online, you might have a complete disclosure. I assume no risk. What you do is unuseful. It's not really a concern there. But the bigger concern is if this is not done well, they can be very dangerous and that they might just explode on your hands. But there's probably not a risk of liability just by sharing the file online, unless you're selling it as a product that's of a safety and standard. But I think most people are selling it; they're giving it for free. Yes, go ahead.
Just curious, does your client get a patent for his invention?
Quite the opposite. He believes in open sourcing everything.
Yeah.
He doesn't want this information to be controlled. He makes guns that look a heck of a lot like Glocks, a heck of a lot like 6 Hours, but they're not. So he tries to avoid any sort of patented materials. Tiffany?
Do you know about the CRS Firearms Matt Hoover case? He was selling these metal cards where hypothetically you could cut out the drawing on them and turn it into an auto key card for AR-15, but no one could get it to work. But he's been in prison and for I think since 2021 now. But that seems more like a First Amendment, also like he was just selling it as business cards with a bottle opener and had a drawing on it.
Is a business card made of metal?
Mhm.
And people try to get cute, right? So if
Yeah.
you're selling a metal card that you can punch out to make a key to convert to a full automatic weapon,
It didn't work though.
It
It was
wasn't
like
designed to
hypothetical.
either. It wasn't meant to be cut out.
It was just a drawing.
Yeah.
Like you had to. The ATF tried for the case and they couldn't even get it to work.
They
Experts
had to do
couldn't
like
get it to work.
serious work to get it. to
Yeah,
work.
and so it was
Kind of
just a like a.
yeah, I usually get this question though, and I'll answer this question also. The risk of 3D printing is not even the guns themselves. It's to produce these little sears, these little things that you could put on a Glock, something else, make full automatic. That's the bigger risk, because these are just truly little pieces of plastic that can turn if you don't know, semi-automatic, full automatic. Semi-automatic, pull the trigger once, one bullet comes out, right? Full automatic, you pull the trigger once, sprays, right? Empty the entire clip. So actually the bigger concern is these devices that convert from semi to full. And that's actually what most 3D printing the risk is, and it's not the gun itself. The ATF has tried to shut down these are very hard to stop because you can make these very easily. Yes.
So you mentioned the gun manufacturers. Like, I would imagine that some of the bigger manufacturers like Holster, Smith & Wesson, like, they try and lobby Congress to ban 3D printed guns just as like a business move.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that or not really?
I mean, indirectly. So what I would say is this: we've been litigating this issue now for more than a decade. The NRA has never supported our side, right? Gun manufacturers don't agree with us, so we are sort of in the outliers. So SAF, Second Amendment Foundation, is very good. Gun Owners of America have been very good, but the NRA is not. So they haven't actively opposed it through legislation, but they haven't backed us through litigation either. In fact, this is a true story. During this entire insane period in 2018, where we're being shut down, President Trump tweeted about us. And he said, I just talked to the NRA. We don't need these plastic guns. So if you ever wonder what it's like to have President Trump tweet about you, been there. So I'm trying to litigate this case. And I'm like, oh, Trump, man, you're killing me. And like, who did he talk to? We have no idea. I think he might made up. We have no idea. Right. He talked to someone at the NRA. And then you have judges saying, well, President Trump tweeted this in my court. I'm like, oh, God, leave me alone. I'm trying to litigate my case. So I know how DOJ lawyers feel. I've been there. Yes.
I feel like the conversation in recent years has shifted from 3D printed guns to ghost guns, where it's like you can just order the individual parts
Right.
separately and start to build them together. Do you think like those ghost gun kits, that's more of just like a pure two-way issue? Like there's not really intersection with First Amendment or
Right. So another case I've lost a lot of cases, unfortunately, was Vanderstock v. Garland or Vanderstock v. Bondi decided last year. And this was the Biden era rule that banned the so-called gun kits. And the word ghost gun, I don't like that phrase. People use it. It means an untraceable gun. There's a gun without a serial number, right? That's why they say it's a ghost gun. And the Supreme Court upheld Congress's power or the administration's power to restrict these sort of gun kits. I think these rulings are wrong, but that's the final rule. The Fifth Circuit ruled the right way. Supreme Court reversed 8-1 or 7-2-ish. The gun kits are actually far more prevalent. It's a lot easier to put these kits together than to 3D print from scratch. But then again, even the kits themselves require some skill. The lawyer for the government, the Solicitor General Prelogger, came in and said, oh, I built one of these. Great, great, great. Did you actually fire it? Right? You know, you might have screwed the holes and put it all together, but it was probably not functional. So I think it still requires some level of talent, and that wasn't accurately conveyed at the court, unfortunately. Yes, in the back?
Given that these guns are mostly plastic, has there been any concerns that anyone's raised about transporting them through airports or something where they might not be detected because of the lack of metal?
It's a good question. So even if the guns themselves are plastic, you still need a bullet, which is metal. Right. You can, in theory, at least have plastic bullets. They're not lethal. I guess they would be very painful. But you still need to have a metal bullet. And also, we have body scanners and other devices that can detect these sorts of things. But how do I put this? If you want to smuggle things into an airport, you're going to do it. These sorts of regimes are not very effective to stop it. We have time?
We have maybe one more question.
More question? No? Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.